I'll turn it over to our guests of honor, Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman. And we're going to start with Edward Herman. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay? Okay. Well, I'm starting because I've been at the conference, and so I'm going to be commenting on the comments on the propaganda model here, and then we'll let Noam take over after I finish these comments. But there have been a lot of very useful comments about the propaganda model during this conference. I wasn't able to hear them all, and we'll gather them. No doubt they'll have an effect on us in the long run, but I wanted to make a few remarks about some of them right off the bat. Some of them were very constructive. I think maybe the most important suggestion was that we need to add to ideology the terrorism question. The terrorism is an ideological element that's become pretty important, and there were a lot of people who thought that we ought to be adding that to our list. Another thing that was suggested, I think, was probably a good idea. A lot of people thought that we were underrating the power of the government as a filter or an element that was creating the news on a really large scale. Some people pointed out that the government had increased leverage over the media because the media wanted to consolidate and so on. And they subsidize the media. The government has become much more sophisticated in managing the media. So maybe we ought not to just keep it under the rubric of sourcing. Maybe we ought to have the government as a power element that should be independent within the propaganda model. Another thing that was suggested was that we should add to FLAC. Under FLAC, maybe we should take account of the fact that the pro-Israel lobby has become pretty darn formidable, and also that the right-wing bloggers. This book by Eric Poulard has a very extensive treatment of how important the bloggers, especially the right-wing bloggers in America, are in disciplining the media, putting a lot of pressure on them. They're a real important FLAC machine. Probably we should be giving that more credence. Quite a few people talked about the fact that the propaganda model doesn't cover everything. Well, we never claimed that it covered everything. Some people pointed out that individuals within the media have a certain amount of power and flexibility. Professional standards sometimes influence the actions of individuals in the media. We never denied that. We always recognized that to be true. The question is, can they overpower the other elements in the media when the dominant elements in the system want something pushed forward? One of the media analysts named Dan Hallen has argued that in the professional standards are a really important thing for getting the media into a better shape. But Dan Hallen, when he studied the election in El Salvador in 1982, he admitted that all those 700 journalists there recognized that this was not a very healthy election. But then Dan Hallen admitted that nevertheless the Reagan administration was able to dictate exactly how this election was viewed in the media. This remarkable contradiction between what the professional standards of the journalists was and the result of how they performed in dealing with this issue. One other third point that has been made, or question's been raised with regard to the propaganda model, is that it's not very good on, or it doesn't cover domestic issues, and only addresses foreign issues. This is not true. It's true in the manufacturing consent that we don't deal with domestic issues. But both Noam Chomsky and I have address those often. In this book I put up called The Myth of the Liberal Media, there's a chapter on the chemical industry, which I recommend to you. The chemical industry's treatment in the media has been a perfect illustration of the workings of the propaganda model. And things that are interest of people in Canada, the treatment of the healthcare system, the single-payer option, is a beautiful illustration of the effectiveness of the propaganda model. The public would seem to want a single-payer system, but the media won't address it because of the power elements in the United States seem to shape the way the media treats this issue. There are other people. Both Chomsky and I have also talked about how the decline of labor in the 80s was treated in the media. It was essentially ignored. It's always struck us a very interesting thing, and I think it was in 1988-89 that there was a huge strike of miners in the Soviet Union, but at the same time there was a strike of the Pittston strike in the United States. And the Soviet miners' strike got a lot of front-page attention in the American media, and the Pittston strike, I don't think, got it on the front page once. Another, again, a good illustration of the domestic applications of the model. One other point that was raised, some people have argued during this conference that we don't cover enough features that really could affect the performance of the media. We don't deal with individual behavior, individuals' preference, and the organization of the media. There are a lot of possible things that would affect media performance. Well, when you spell those things out, there's no doubt that those things would be useful in looking at any particular piece of news coverage. But they're not going to yield any large results. They're not going to be very useful for looking at larger movements in the system. I think for research purposes, if you used a broad array of potential things that would affect the media, you would undoubtedly, for individual cases, be able to do a better job. But this would require specification for each item that you study. If you want to draw large conclusions, you have to be reaching for the broader aspects of what really determines the media. So what we would conclude, I believe, is that if you look at the way the propaganda model has worked and how it applies in a lot of cases very beautifully. And these are important cases. And so it doesn't apply everywhere. It may not be useful for detailed research purposes on every issue, but as long as it hits the mark on a wide range of issues, and as long as the propaganda model fits a lot of major campaigns, both domestic and foreign, I think it's going to be a useful model. And as I argued this morning, I think the model is stronger now than it was in 1988, given the institutional changes that have taken place.
As I keep telling lots of people around the world, and lots of people down here, there's a reason why on our joint book, Manufacturing Consent, Ed's name comes first over his strong objections. Our joint work is usually alphabetical. My name has to come first in the alphabet. But in this case, I insisted on it, and he finally reluctantly agreed, because the propaganda model is, in fact, mostly his work. I mean, I agree with it, but he deserves primary credit for the model, all the work in that we had previously written together and separately about many similar topics. A couple of volumes in 1979 were pretty much on this topic and other things. In just a few remarks, let me try to say something about topics that I don't think we covered and that I'd like to see covered more carefully. Maybe they have been, but I don't know about it. And I'll approach this from the point of view of the limitations of my own interest in this topic and concern with it over the past 60 years, I guess. I started thinking about it. My focus, my own work and attention has been primarily the elite media, what are sometimes called the agenda-setting media, the ones that sort of set the framework that others adhere to.